Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to start off things different. I'm actually going to start off with a riddle, and I want to see if you guys can figure it out. I walk a path that's not the norm. In my politics, I break the form. My skin is black, my views are right. Some say I'm bold, some say some want to fight. Who am I? Okay, and if you guessed, it's a black conservative. Now, the reason why I made this riddle and why we're even talking about a black conservative is because honestly, lately I've been watching the news and I've been watching a lot of people, especially on the left, who are black, obviously, because we know that the black community predominantly votes left. And they were talking about a black conservative. And a lot of them are amazed or dumbfounded that there's such thing as a black conservative. And it got me to really think and do a lot of deep thinking as to why can't people understand why black people might vote conservatively. And it really showed that a lot of people don't understand the black conservative vote. So in today's episode, we're going to be reacting to someone named Coleman Hughes, which some people have heard of, some people haven't heard of. I actually found out about this guy because of the show called The View, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, where Sonny Hostin, one of the co-hosts on The View, kind of did some bad attacks and not a good faith on Coleman Hughes. And she said that he was being used by the right because he had some talking points that aligned with the conservative.
Many in the black community, if I'm being honest with you, because I want to be, believe that you are being used as a pawn by the right and that you're a charlatan of sorts.
He's not a Republican.
So how do you...
He's never voted for a Republican.
You've said that you're a conservative.
No,
you did. You actually said that in a podcast that you did 2 weeks ago.
I said I was a conservative.
Yes, you did. So, but my question to you is, how do you respond to those critics?
I don't think I've been co-opted by anyone. I've only voted twice, both for Democrats. Although I'm an independent, I would vote for a Republican, probably a non-Trump Republican if they were compelling. I don't think there's any evidence I've been co-opted by anyone, and I think that's an ad hominem tactic people use to not address really the important conversations we're having here. And I think it's better, and it would be better for everyone if we stuck to the topics rather than make it about me.
Now, me personally, I don't agree with what Sonny Hostin said. And this actually came to what I said in my last video that I posted, which is black people are not a monolith. Just because he has some conservative values or he even talks about things that may align with what conservatives say doesn't mean he's conservative. If you actually look deep into who Coleman Hughes is, just like how he said in the video, is that he voted for 2 Democrats. He may have some views that align with the conservative, but it doesn't mean that he's a conservative. He's just like me. I have some things that align with the conservative values, which are family and crime, but socially, I might be more liberal. And I think this is something that most people, and especially black people on the left, need to understand about the black conservative vote. So in today's episode, he actually had a sit down and discussion with a woman who's actually a black conservative woman to really understand the black conservative vote. And they touched on a lot of issues, but what I'm really going to focus in on was culture and family in that episode, in that part that they talked about in the video. Okay, let's get into it.
What has your experience been like? I'll tell you what my experience has been like. So I'm not a Republican or a conservative, but a lot of my politics, especially on issues related to crime and the police and law and order, are basically conservative in the sense that I think more police is better. I think that crime, in a way, should be viewed as what people on the left would call a social justice issue, because the #1 cause of death for black men in their 20s has been homicide for a long time, and that's true of no other race. And a lot of what I spent my time doing around 2019 and 2020 was pushing back against the progressive movement, which said that that police were basically an arm of white supremacy and colonialism, and the best thing you could do for black neighborhoods is to get rid of the police, defund the police, or otherwise make the policeman's job harder. To me, this seemed exactly the opposite of everything that high crime neighborhoods, which are disproportionately black in the country, need. And combined with that, there was a persistent myth born kind of.
So before he continues, I do gotta say I really do agree with him. I think this is really an issue that I've seen in the news recently, and especially a lot of these liberal leaders, especially the black liberal leaders, which like to push that police officers are evil, that there shouldn't be police officers in these black communities. And I really think that's a dangerous thing. One, these black communities really do need a lot of police officers. They're there to, I understand that police officers haven't been, or actually per se, the history of America when it comes to policing hasn't always been the greatest. But we are in 2025 where there's a lot of technology where police officers are allowed to wear body cams. So there is that sort of protection, and I understand that can help if a life has been lost. But at least it can be there to uphold justice when something goes wrong. But that's a whole nother tangent. Let me just get back on track. Is that we do need more police officers in these communities. They're there to help the black communities, and a lot of these mothers, or not even mothers, just a lot of these black families don't feel safe when coming out because they understand that there's going to be shootings. No mother should have to worry about when their child is sleeping that a stray bullet can kill their child when they're in the house, which actually happened a few months ago in North York to a young black kid. Kids who are wandering, just walking, shouldn't be worried about getting hit by a stray bullet in a drive-by shooting. Families should be able to walk within their own community for which they pay rent for and taxes for. Businesses should be able to flourish in these black communities without having worried to be robbed or mugged or even killed or injured. And police officers that's what police officers are there for, to prevent that from happening. But when there's a demonization of what police officers are, how they move, or what police officers are, what they do and how they move, and that reluctant to open up to police officers, you see that it has a triple effect, and you can say it really has a triple effect on the whole black community. So just to pertain to what I'm really trying to say is that we really have to stop the demonization of these police officers. They're there to protect us. We should be utilizing, especially people in these black communities, these police officers. You want to get these people who are terrorizing you off the street so your community can be safe, so businesses can flourish, so kids don't have to worry about getting killed. Parents don't have to worry about their young children being killed. And honestly, a lot of times jail can save a lot of these kids, to tell you the truth. Because some of these kids are so wild, especially these quote-unquote YNs. They're extremely wild, and we really need police officers more in these black communities.
In 2012 and 2013, with the BLM movement, which was that it's open season on the cops killing black people. Mm-hmm. And if you actually dig into that issue, it happens to black people and white people every year in very small numbers, akin to getting struck by lightning in terms of how likely it actually is for an unarmed person to be shot and killed by police. And the racial proportions pretty strictly match the patterns of crime in the country to begin with. So, you know, for every George Floyd, there was a Tony Timpa, who was a white guy that was in almost the identical situation, and on and on. And so to me, it seemed like though on certain other issues, I certainly lean liberal, it seemed to me the left had a huge blind spot on the issue of crime and race and exactly what was happening. And the result of all the 2020 policies that were ostensibly meant to help black people and help black neighborhoods hurt all of those neighborhoods. Not only the riots where you have people destroying even black-owned businesses in the name of anti-racism, or you just have people destroying businesses in black neighborhoods, which means that those neighborhoods are like, people aren't going to want to live in those neighborhoods, right? Mm-hmm. And so anyway, this is all to say, like, this was a lot of part of my frustration as a writer, was trying to persuade people on the left that their own stated values should lead them to be pro law and order. So I'm curious if anything I just said resonated with you.
Well, the beginning of what you said when you brought up the term like white supremacy, I like really can't stand that term. It drives me crazy because, you know, the term supreme has a positive connotation, but the term white supremacy obviously has a negative connotation. But it's like almost like this backwards programming that has made Black people believe that someone else is better than you. And I don't like the way that, you know, people use that term against Black people. But to go back to also what you're saying about the crime situation, you know, a lot of these things I think boil down to like family and educational values.
And she brought up a good point. The 2 points that she really brought up are family and educational values. I think, as I'm pretty sure everybody can see, there's been a real deterioration in the Black community and within the Black family unit. And when family isn't prioritized, you can see the effects that it has on an individual. I'm gonna relay some of my own personal advice. I mean, my own personal, just my own personal life experiences. Is that growing up, my father and mother, one of the things that they're really adamant on is education, staying out of trouble. Now, as I said, me being the oldest child, I didn't get the best grades, nor did I, and I got in trouble a lot. And that wasn't saying that my parents didn't do a good job. I was still able to go to school, go to university, but they were really strict on that. Even the times where I really wanted to drop out of school, that's one thing that they didn't allow. They made sure to focus on make sure that I focused on my education, made sure that I focused on staying out of trouble, and really just understanding understanding about their own struggles they faced as a young individual, so I wouldn't have to face those same struggles. Now, granted, I don't think education is the extreme key to becoming successful, wealthy, rich, anything like that. But it does play a part into an individual's upbringing and making sure they stay or veer on the right path. And going back to family, it's really important that you have a mother and father in your life, especially for a young individual. And I'm really talking to a lot of young men, because a lot of young men who grew up in with a single mother in the household, you can see a lot of them start to adapt those. They don't really think. They start to think a lot more emotionally than logically. Secondly, a lot of men cannot be raised by women. Now, this is not me saying that women do not do a good job of raising young men, or a single woman absolutely cannot raise a young man. But a lot of times, that just doesn't work out well. And even if I relate to my own life, when I used to get in trouble, and after past the age of 16, when I was getting in trouble, my mom will tell me, "Oh, you're misbehaving." She'll try to say I'm grounded or even try to punish me. I wouldn't really take it serious because my mom couldn't really overpower me. She couldn't yell at me. But something my father could do was overpower me, was yell at me, and worst comes to worst, he can beat my ass, which will set me straight. Now, I'm not advocating to beat your children or anything like that, or to harm your children. I'm just telling you, and that's how I grew up in that culture and how the Nigerian culture is. But to this fact that we really have to focus more on the family, cultural, and the education value of it. A lot of these young kids are not being raised up in great family households, and all this does is repeat a cycle and a cycle and a cycle again, over and over and over again. And we're seeing this a lot in the Black community. So to her point, I really do agree with her. It has to come down to family and educational values, because we see this in other cultures. If you look at the Asian community, where they prioritize education, and you can see that their families are one of the most wealthiest people in America. Hell, in the Western world. Now, again, I understand that there's a whole racial community or a whole racism behind, the history of racism behind what is going on in the Black community, but it shouldn't be used as a crutch or as an excuse. Where each and every one of us are destined for greatness, and it's something that can be achieved, but you do have to put in the work. And that comes with parents raising their kids right, and also enforcing that education onto the kids so they can find a good career, raise a good family, and start that cycle, but not a bad cycle, a great cycle where they can build generational wealth and stop the crime and poverty within the Black community.
And, how we live in our communities. And then a lot of the things that we see in the news are coming from people that aren't in those communities, the people that don't see that stuff every day. So sometimes when I talk to reporters, especially DC people, like the things that they care about and they talk about aren't reality to the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. Like if you go to, people in Southside Chicago, if you go to people in Bankhead in Atlanta, like what their reality is and what we see is not the same thing. And so I think that, we all need to take a step back and look at what's real in these neighborhoods and what's real in these, communities, because a lot of Black people want more police in their communities. They want to feel safer in their neighborhoods, which boils back down to what the president's been trying to do, bringing in the National Guard to protect people in these communities.
Yeah, we'll get to that. A couple other touch points for me. I remember so in 2014, Michael Brown is killed outside of St. Louis in Ferguson, and there's riots all over Ferguson. And I visited that neighborhood in, I think, 2019. So this is 5 years after the riot, right? Mm-hmm. And there were still literally empty mom and pop shops, including, I think, a Black-owned barbershop that was still vacant to that day, 5 years later, as a result of those riots from 2015. And to me, it's like the perfect description of the limousine liberal luxury belief phenomenon, where you would have probably, if you go back to 2014, you probably have some New York Times op-ed writer basically apologizing for the riot, basically justifying it. Mm-hmm. But that same writer is never going to go back there years later and look at how the ripple effect of that riot has actually affected people that live in that community and aren't going to leave that community, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this sense in which the emotions of liberal elites in particular are really served and massaged and tickled in some way by the issue of Black poverty and the police. But those politics don't translate into anything that actually helps those communities. And
to tell you the truth, this is actually something that I found really, really interesting. I think a lot of people in the Black community also don't look up to the greatest people. And when I'm saying that is that, especially the Liberal Party, they've taken advantage of the Black community a lot. I like to say they pimp them out. They like to fuck them over and then send them out and then push them out when they're done with them. He stated before that a lot of, especially liberal elites, like to speak on what's going on in the Black community, saying that there's not enough education, that they're not, that they're being mistreated. When, yes, I think there are some valid points that there's not a lot of education in the Black community, which there needs to be more funding, but also there needs to be more self-accountability in the Black community. There has to be more awareness of the crime issues that are going on in the Black community, and not just spreading and putting more money into those communities is not going to solve the crime issues only. There has to be more police officers. There has to be more law enforcement. And sadly, some people are not going to like what I'm going to say. Some of these people, especially a lot of these young Black males, have to go to jail. Because if you're going to be terrorizing a whole community of people who are paying taxes, who are trying to make a good life for themselves and their kids, you don't deserve to be out in the free world. You're causing more damage than you are causing good in the world. So you do need to be locked up. And I'm always gonna encourage, there needs to be more police officers so that businesses can thrive, so that mom and dads don't have to worry about their kids going out and getting shot or getting terrorized. So to his point, yeah, a lot of these communities need to stop listening to a lot of these rich people, I don't want to say white people, but a lot of these rich people who don't live in these neighborhoods, who are elites, who are rich, who don't have to worry about these same safety concerns that these people in these communities do. Stop listening to them and look at the community that you're living in right now about your safety concerns. And a lot of it, and some of it has to do with the media, because they don't really care about what's going on in the community. They just care that, if a police officer kills an unarmed Black man, all police officers are bad, but they don't care about the thousands and thousands, not, okay, let me not exaggerate, but the hundreds of kids who are getting killed by other black men. And like she stated, a lot of these parents really do want more police officers in their communities. And it really goes back to when conservatives talk about law enforcement, law enforcement, law enforcement, whereas liberals are not really pro-law. They're more about demonizing law enforcement.
Let's talk about the National Guard deployment in DC. So obviously DC has been one of the trickiest cities in America because crime has long been a problem. I mean, we often talk about Chicago or St. Louis when we think about crime, and in the 60s people used to talk about the Bronx. But DC has been almost as bad as those places pretty consistently for a very long time. It's had an incarceration rate that is among the highest in the nation. I remember at some point it was like the balance between black men and black women that lived in the city was extremely lopsided, like maybe one of the most in the country because so many black men were in prison. And so talk to me a little bit about crime in DC as a problem. What makes it a unique problem, and how do you view it?
I think that what's very unique about the DC situation is a lot of it is juvenile offenders and not adult offenders. And, you know, I feel like the city doesn't do a good job of, you know, giving these kids more things to do in the neighborhoods. You know, I live in Southeast, but Navy Yard. And Navy Yard's like, you know, where the National Stadium is. And any given weekend at like 7 o'clock, like there's just kids running rampant with no parents. Like where are the parents at? And I think, I mean, what's similar to DC, what DC has is similar to other cities is I think a lot of this is a parenting problem and family issue. I mean, we can bring in the National Guard and, you know, that's a temporary solution to a long-term problem. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done with, you know, raising kids the right way and, you know, prioritizing their education.
And she hit the nail on the head, man. I think she's absolutely right. To the point about the National Guards, it is a short-term solution. It's not a long-term solution. Yes, you're probably gonna stop crime in the short term, but long-term, what is gonna happen? And it really comes down to parenting. And I'm not gonna lie, I forgot where I heard this from, but I think there's been a few laws that have been passed in the United States where if the kid's under the age of 16 and they commit a crime, that the parents can also be punished. And I agree with that. I do think the parents should be punished because as a parent, you do have the right, you have the responsibility of making sure that your kid is raised right. Now, of course, once they get past the age of 18, there's very little you can do. But under the age of 16, it's unacceptable for the kids just to be wandering, causing havoc and doing nothing. It's completely wrong. And what this stems from is there's not a lot of that people are not taking accountability for their own actions. One, stop having kids out of wedlock. It is extremely dangerous. When you're having kids out of wedlock and you're not staying married to that person, there's been studies that have shown that kids do better when they have two parents in the household than one parent in the household. About the earlier issue that I talked about the father not being able, about a single mother not being able to raise a single young man. As I stated again, I'm not saying that for all single mothers, but for a good majority, we see that issue happening and occurring. When there are two parents in the household, there's dual income, which, don't get me wrong, the economy is hard, but at least with the dual income, it's much more easier. Then she also emphasized on the educational aspect. Now, I'm not a person who believes that you need to go to university to be successful. But education comes in so much aspects. You don't need to go to university to become wealthy, rich, or even be successful. But you do need to learn. You do need to seek for knowledge. And I do think that, especially in the Black community, that is something that's not really emphasized on. You don't need to go to university. Go to college, learn a trade. Hell, if you don't want to do that, we have YouTube, we have ChatGPT. Go learn something so you can provide value to the world. And parents don't emphasize that enough, which is extremely dangerous in these communities. You have to instill that into your kids from young, so that when they grow up, they can repeat that. It becomes a pattern that you have to instill in yourself, so that when they grow old, when they have their own family, that's something that they can pass on to their kids, and then we keep the cycle going on. Instead of it being a bad cycle, it's a good cycle. So she's absolutely right. Parents need to be a lot more involved in these communities. And it's sad to say, I don't know how the government's going to do that. The government can't force it. But I'm also not going to hide from an aspect. I do think I think money needs to be poured into these communities, but money shouldn't be poured into these communities unless the crime has been cleaned up. And there has to be more self-accountability. And parents have to take more responsibility for these young children who are committing these crimes. And if that means that you have to face you have to get in some legal troubles so that you can avoid that from happening, then so be it. Because shit, man, what's going on in these communities is bad. And as Black people, we can do so much more better. We can do so much more better.
That, the National Guard is, what it's doing is good, and people want that in their communities, but long term, I don't think that's a viable solution.
So that's kind of depressing though, because if it's a parenting issue, how does the government fix parenting? The federal government, the state government, the city government can't really force people's parents to become more functional.
Mm-hmm. I think what the solution could start with is, giving real consequences. I've seen, recently they're trying to change the age range where you can convict a child that's I think they changed it from 16 to 14. Mm-hmm. I think giving people real consequences will make parents, wake up more and realize they need to be more involved in their kids' lives. But I think that's the way that, you balance the government problem with the parenting issue.
Yeah, so what is the, why is it such a young problem? Because I remember when I was at Columbia, there was an incident where I lived in Harlem at the time on the other side of Morningside Park. I don't know if you know that area at all, but Columbia's campus is to the west, and then there's a park that slopes almost steeply all the way down, and then Harlem is on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so I walk that park every day, and there's only one or two ways to get across the park. There's one staircase, and one day undergrad girl, she was walking down the park and just randomly got stabbed to death by somebody. And that was the place I walked by twice a day, those exact steps where she died. And I remember before they had caught the person who did it, I talked to one of the cops in the park, and it's all anyone was talking about. I asked him, do you have any idea who it might have been or what it might have been? And he said to me, I don't know yet, but it was probably some 13-year-old kid. That was his guess, based on the pattern of crime in the area as he knew it. Come to find out, a couple days later, it was a 13-year-old kid that stabbed her to death. Maybe it was a robbery and then he panicked when she fought back, or maybe it was some weird gang initiation, egging on of a young person situation, or maybe the kid was just a psychopath. I don't actually know. But what are we supposed to think of situations where we have 13 and 14-year-old kids committing crimes? Because on the one hand, you want to treat them like not a fully formed person. You want to give them a second chance because they're young. On the other hand, it seems like you think one of the solutions is to enforce consequences as if they're an adult.
Yeah. I think when we're talking about certain situations, it's a situational matter. Like murder, I think that at 14, you know what you're doing. I don't think that that, boils down to, they're not fully functional yet. I think
So this is where I slightly disagree with her. I do think that it needs to be looked on a case-to-case basis when it comes to charging these youth offenders with these serious crimes as an adult. And even murder, the reason why I slightly disagree with her is because, we all know that study that most people your brain is not fully functional until the age of 25. And then a lot of stuff that comes with maturity is emotional maturity. It's not only physical maturity, but emotional maturity. And at some cases, a 14-year-old kid doesn't know what they're doing all the time. That's why you see, especially in these poverty gang city communities, where older kids will tell the younger kids to hold guns. These young kids don't know. They just know that, hey, we're gonna get less time, but they don't know the actual actions of what they're doing. Just like they might send a kid to go do a murder crime. They don't know what they're doing. They just see it like, yes, I'm gonna be fit. I'm gonna fitting in, and we know that I'm only gonna spend a few years in jail and not be let out. But they don't really understand about the harm that they're causing, not only into that other person, but the other person's individual family, their own family, and the community as a whole. So I do get where she's coming from. I just think that there's a little more nuance to it, you know? You just can't say charge the kid even if it's murder as an adult. I believe that throughout the whole circumstances, you have to see it. Because right now, I know a girl that I've had a conversation with, and she really tells me about all these stuff, about when she deals with a lot of these offenders, and a lot of them really don't know what they're doing, especially the youth. They just know that, yeah, it's for fun, or I was part of this growing up, and this is all I've known growing up. So can you really fault somebody, especially at the age of 14, if that's all they've ever seen? So that point, it's a little interesting. That's where I slightly disagree with her, but it is, I'll probably say like if I'm doing out of 100%, 80% I agree with her, and the rest 20% I disagree with her.
We know what's right and what's wrong, and I think that's very clear to most people, unless they have a mental disorder, and then that's a different situation. But I don't think we all know the answer to that question at the moment. But I do think that, you know, when it comes to certain situations, like having a real consequence will make people more aware. But, you know, I could tell stories about my family members, for example. And from some of the situations I've seen, a lot of this boils down to having, you know, family structure, and especially having a father at home.
Right. Okay, so Trump's decision to deploy the National Guard has obviously rankled a lot of people, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Do you think there's any merit to the argument that Trump's only doing it for reasons of political optics because he thinks it's good politics, right? It pisses off all the right people. It makes him look strong to his base. And it creates the kind of fight that he thinks he can win, as opposed to a genuine concern for crime as such?
That's a tough question. I think the president does have a genuine concern for crime. I do genuinely believe that. I think that if that weren't the case, you know, Mayor Bowser, she extended, you know, the National Guard being in D.C. because we're seeing that it's helping the current situation. But I don't think it has anything to do with politics. I think he's just a strong leader, and, you know, he's using his power as the president to protect communities and make these neighborhoods safer. You know, one of the things he ran on during the campaign was make America safe again.
Yeah, so, I mean, the counter argument to that would be all of a sudden on January 6th, he's on the side of the people beating up cops, right? And so if you look at Trump in his totality, it seems like he's for law and order when his base likes it. And when his base likes chaos, like on January 6th, suddenly he's against law and order and he's pardoning people that assaulted cops, you know?
The president, I think.
So we'll continue. Coleman Hughes did bring up a good point. And my personal opinion, it's tough. I think that 70 to 80% Donald Trump is trying to clean up crime. And I think the other percent is political optics. I'm not gonna lie, I think he finds it funny fucking over or fucking with the liberals or the other people on who are not Republican, which is a vast majority of other people. I think he does find it funny, but I disagree with Coleman Hughes. I mean, not disagree, but I will say to Coleman Hughes that he really does want to solve crime. She's right. He did run on making America safe again. And what that involves is really cleaning up these black communities. A lot of people in the black and a lot of people in these black communities cause a lot of crime, even though they're only about 13% of the American population, but they do make up a lot of the crime that goes on in America, which is it's really sad. And my personal opinion, sending in the National Guard, I think it's a great thing. I think that it needs to be used as a deterrent. I know people have some fears that, oh, it's Donald Trump using the to military to take over America. I don't really see it like that. I see it that he's using it as a deterrence in the short term to handle the crime. And a lot of these cities, and it's not only blue states, it's in red states too, even though the majority of the crime is in a lot of blue Democrat mayor, cities that are run by, in some states that are red, it's run in cities. In those states, the cities are blue, run by mayors. So that's where a lot of that crime is. But going back to my point, I do feel that sending the National Guard it's a good starting step. Let me put it like that. And I feel like if Trump was to do more, once he cleans up these streets, to try to put more money to these communities, try to fund more after school programs, so there's something for a lot of these kids to do, so they don't go towards the life of crime. Trying to make sure that they're trying to nurture the balance between police officers and people in these communities, so that they can work hand in hand with each other. So when crimes do occur, they don't have to worry about being called a snitch or anything like that. That they're there to report to the police right away, so that crimes can be solved. So again, I think the National Guard being sent to these cities is a great thing. Do I believe there's some political optics about it? Hell yes. And honestly, I'm here for it. I think it needs to be sent out. A message needs to be sent out. I think, especially, I'm from Canada, where our justice system is ass. We have a cash bail system that is so bad that people who commit crimes get set on bail and can come out the next day. And it really affects a lot of these black communities poor communities, which is extremely unfair. So the National Guard, yes, it's going to be a deterrent that's going to deter crime from happening. Not fully, but it's going to do a good job. I think there hasn't been crime in Washington for almost over 30 days, which that's amazing. To tell you the truth, I don't know if I'm wrong. I don't know about those specific numbers, but I know it's been a couple of weeks that crime hasn't happened. And honestly, I would love to see it across America in different states. Now, there's whole laws about it. If he's allowed to do it, he would need permission from the governors to do something like that. So if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it's kind of sad, because I do think it's something that needs to happen to try to prevent a lot of these crimes from happening and lower crime, and also to be a deterrence.
I think is leading the way he knows how, and that's being a strong leader. And, some people take that the wrong way, whether that's, how people feel about the January 6th situation, or how people feel about, him bringing in the National Guard. I think that what matters at this moment is what he's doing in these communities and what he's doing as the president this time by bringing in, law enforcement to help protect communities.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you can see from watching that video, I really can understand the black conservative vote a lot more, honestly, watching that video. There are a few things that were mentioned in that conversation between Coleman Hughes and that black conservative woman. And some of the points that were really brought up that I saw a big pattern on was strong leadership, lowering crime, bringing the family unit together, and self-accountability. And me thinking about that, if I see one party that's emphasizing that a lot, why wouldn't I want to join that party? Why wouldn't I want to be more involved with that party? And in my personal opinion, when I saw the whole race between the conservatives and Democrats, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, hope I'm saying it right, was that the conservatives really talked upon these issues. When Joe Biden was president, we, as black people, for me personally, I did not see a strong leader. I saw someone who's, and I don't like to speak ill of people, but he looked extremely weak. Especially crime. Donald Trump ran on lowering crime. And now it's like, for me personally, when I see him sending a National Guard to Washington to make sure that crime gets lowered. Him talking about doing that to other things. Why is that not that's attractive for me, especially for someone if I'm somebody who lived in these communities where it was crime ridden and you saw an individual who's talking about lowering crime and he's doing it with a heavy fist because that is something that's really needed in today's society. Then she also talked about bringing the family unit together, or the family unit, whereas you don't see that much on the liberal side, but you see it more on the conservative side when they talk about family and religion and how important it is to have fathers in the homes, which the Liberal Party doesn't really talk about as much, whereas in the Conservative Party really focuses heavily on the family unit and having a father in the home. And then lastly is self-accountability. Now this is something that I believe is 1000% doesn't get talked about. And again, I'm going off my personal experiences, is that I've seen a lot more on the conservative side than I have seen on the liberal side when it comes to self-accountability, especially when it comes to the Black community. There's a big victimhood mentality on the liberal side of things when they talk about the Black community, whereas in conservatives, or at least the conservatives that I look at and watch, is that yes, there is some racism, or there has been racism in the past, but that shouldn't hold you back in what you're trying to do. Me personally, again, I can see why people tend to vote more conservative, or why some Black people tend to vote more conservatively, because in aspect, Black people do tend to have more conservative values. And I don't think it should be dumbfounded. I think the Black community shouldn't be only tied to one party, which is the Liberal Party. I think that's very dangerous, because how do you expect a party to look out or actually work for you when you easily give them their vote? I'm not telling you to go vote for the Conservative Party, but I don't think one party should actually ultimately have your vote for like that. All should ultimately have your vote as easily as that. They should at least work a lot more harder than the Liberal Party worked to get the Black vote. So all in all, I can really see why I can really understand the Black conservative vote, why some Black people have started to shift towards the Conservative Party. And Donald Trump did a good job of capturing a good percentage of the Black vote. And it's something that I think more people on the liberal side should look into, that if they want to capture those Black people back, you should look into that and try to acknowledge and tackle some of the issues that are going on in the Black community instead of pandering and always preaching a victimhood mentality to the Black community. Because every human being, not only Black people, are destined for greatness. Nothing can hold you back. The only thing that can hold you back, is yourself. If you put in that effort, if you put in that time, you can achieve amazing things. And I think that's what needs to be instilled more into the Black community. And I can see why some Black conservatives vote, or why some Black people vote conservative, because they see that from the Conservative Party. But hey, that's just my opinion. And if you like my content, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.